He said it was over, and just like that, my world shifted. Olivia Hayes whispered to herself, gripping the small blanket wrapped around baby Ethan Jr. The hospital room smelled sharply of antiseptic, and the fluorescent lights hummed above, harsh and unyielding. Outside, the soft footsteps of nurses echoed along the polished corridor, but inside, time felt suspended. Ethan Parker, her husband just days before, now an ex by decree, stood near the doorway, his tailored suit immaculate, posture rigid, eyes cold as winter steel. His voice, calm but cutting, filled the sterile air. I'm filing for divorce. Olivia's hands tightened around the infant, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest, a rhythm that was hers alone to protect. She could hear the faint beeping of the monitors, a steady reminder that life persisted even in moments of rupture. She remembered the nights spent pacing these same floors, waiting for his return, hoping his attention might somehow fix the cracks in their shared dreams. But those days had ended, and reality bore down with the weight of inevitability. Every detail of the room, the whitewashed walls, the harsh glare of the ceiling lights, the distant clatter of a cart, seemed designed to strip her down to vulnerability. Yet she stood firm, a quiet defiance building in the pit of her stomach. Ethan shifted slightly, the subtle movement betraying a flicker of doubt, a hesitation that would not go unnoticed. Olivia met his gaze evenly, the storm in her chest tempered by resolve. Years of whispered insults, dismissed ambitions, and late-night confrontations had forged a resilience she had not known she possessed. She straightened, her shoulders back, and looked at her son, whose tiny hands curled instinctively around her fingers, trusting and unjudging. Dr. Harper appeared at that moment, clipboard in hand, stepping softly, her presence almost gentle against the tension in the room. Do we need to confirm the DNA? She asked, voice low, professional, carrying a weight that made Ethan's jaw tighten. Olivia's pulse quickened, a calculated stillness taking over as she considered her next move. The secret she had guarded for months, the truth that could shift everything, rested between them like an invisible lever ready to tip. Ethan's eyes flickered from her to the infant, the realization dawning too late that control had slipped from his grasp. Olivia's lips curved in a subtle, knowing smile, one that spoke of endurance, strategy, and quiet authority, her inner strength radiating outward, filling the sterile room with an unspoken power that left the future hanging in suspense, a tension that held every breath, every heartbeat, every possibility in perfect balance, daring the world to wonder what would unfold next. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights filled the room as Olivia Hayes settled into the small chair beside Ethan Jr.'s crib, her hands gently brushing over the smooth curve of his tiny head. The sterile scent of antiseptic lingered, sharp yet grounding, reminding her of every sleepless night, every quiet sacrifice she had made to create a life for the two of them on her own terms. Outside the room, the hospital corridors were alive with distant footsteps, the occasional murmur of nurses, a world that moved with indifference to her personal storm. Yet within these walls, every heartbeat mattered. Olivia traced the curve of her son's tiny fingers with her thumb, feeling the warmth, the fragile strength, and in that quiet, intimate moment, she understood that resilience was not loud but steady, a force that did not need recognition to exist. She had spent months reclaiming her identity, rebuilding a life piece by piece, carefully balancing freelance projects, late nights of preparation, and the unwavering attention her son required, each small victory stacking upon the last, forming a fortress of self-sufficiency and quiet power. Dr. Harper approached again, clipboard in hand, her expression professional but tinged with respect, acknowledging Olivia's meticulous care and the careful boundaries she maintained. We will need to schedule the follow-up for next week, she said, and Olivia nodded, responding with a calm that belied the storm of thoughts in her mind, each plan for the future threading together into a tapestry of possibility. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the crib mobile spinning lazily above Ethan Jr., a carousel of animals casting gentle shadows on the pale walls, and she allowed herself a small smile, knowing that the tiny moments of wonder and discovery were as significant as the battles she had endured outside these walls. As she stood, carrying her son carefully to the window, The afternoon sunlight filtered in, warm and gold, highlighting the determination etched into her features, the quiet elegance of a woman who had endured, observed, and grown stronger. The city stretched beyond the hospital, distant traffic humming along avenues. A reminder of the wider world she was now ready to engage with on her own terms, her past no longer a tether, but a foundation from which she could rise. She envisioned the coming days, the careful navigation of social encounters, the silent assertion of boundaries, and the subtle, deliberate steps she would take to ensure her life, and her son's life, were guided by her choices, not the whims of others. Each measured breath, the soft scent of baby lotion, the gentle coo of Ethan Jr., became markers of a new rhythm, a cadence that reminded her that time could heal, could empower, and could give form to the silent victories she had fought for so long. Olivia's gaze returned to the monitor, to the tiny numbers that measured life, and she allowed herself the thought that control was not about domination but about presence, awareness, and the deliberate exercise of her choices, each action infused with a quiet authority that no one could diminish. The room seemed to pulse with this newfound energy, the light, the shadows, and the soft sounds coalescing into a space where strength, love, and hope intertwined, and in that convergence, Olivia knew that the next chapter of her life was hers to define, filled with possibilities that stretched far beyond the sterile walls, each decision an affirmation of resilience, care, and the unspoken power she carried within. The afternoon sun poured through the tall hospital windows, casting a warm glow across the room as Olivia Hayes held Ethan Jr. close, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing sync with her own. Dr. Harper returned, stepping lightly over the polished tile floor, her expression neutral, yet carrying an undercurrent of anticipation that did not go unnoticed. Olivia's gaze was steady, calm, yet alert, every sense attuned to the moment that could change everything. Ethan Parker lingered near the door, his posture stiff, the tailored lines of his suit doing little to hide the tension tightening his shoulders. The quiet click of the nurse's shoes on the linoleum echoed in the space, a metronome marking the seconds that stretched with silent intensity. Olivia placed Ethan Jr. gently in the crib and adjusted the soft blanket around him, her hands deliberate and confident, each movement a testament to months of careful planning, of reclaiming control over the life that had once been dictated by others. Dr. Harper cleared her throat softly, eyes meeting Olivia's with a subtle flicker of understanding, and said, "It is time to review the results." Olivia's heart did not race, for she had prepared for this, had carried the weight of uncertainty and hope in equal measure, and now, standing in the warm light that softened the sterile room, she felt the quiet strength that had grown within her like a fortress. Ethan Parker's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of apprehension passing through the practiced calm he had maintained, the first crack in the armor of certainty that had defined him for so long. Olivia lifted her chin, a composed smile tugging at her lips, one that spoke of resilience, knowledge, and measured triumph, the kind that required no words to be understood. Dr. Harper produced the document, the subtle rustle of paper magnified by the stillness, and Olivia took it with steady hands, her gaze unwavering. The numbers, the names, the confirmation that had once been a source of anxiety now lay plain and undeniable, shifting the balance in the quietest yet most profound way. Ethan Jr. gurgled softly, his tiny hands grasping the edge of the crib, grounding Olivia in the reality of what she had nurtured and protected through months of perseverance and careful vigilance. Ethan Parker took a hesitant step forward, his voice measured, almost cautious. "Olivia." Yet the weight of the past, the years of underestimation and dismissal, made the single word frail against the force of what was unfolding. Olivia's smile deepened, her eyes reflecting not triumph over a person, but the culmination of endurance, foresight, and love that had been constant and unyielding. Dr. Harper's presence remained quietly authoritative, a witness to the shift in energy, as Olivia gently lifted Ethan Jr. and cradled him against her shoulder, her movements fluid, confident, and deliberate, a physical manifestation of the inner strength that had been growing since the moment she had first taken responsibility for her own life. The room seemed to vibrate with the unspoken acknowledgement that a power had shifted, that the future now rested in hands that had been tempered by experience and tempered by care. And as Olivia turned her gaze outward to the sunlight spilling across the hospital floor, every detail, from the glint of her son's eyes to the soft hum of distant machinery, felt infused with a possibility that had once seemed impossible, leaving the story poised on the edge of revelation and promise, a delicate balance of suspense and anticipation that could not be ignored. The late afternoon sunlight shifted, spilling a soft golden glow across the hospital room as Olivia Hayes adjusted the swaddle around Ethan Jr., his tiny fingers curling against her palm. The sterile walls now seemed warmer under the shifting light, the sharp antiseptic scent softened by the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Dr. Harper stood nearby, her presence quiet and measured, observing the careful ritual Olivia performed with her son, the gentle rocking and soothing hum that seemed to fill the space with calm authority. Olivia's eyes moved to the doorway where Ethan Parker lingered, his stance rigid yet hesitant, the polished lines of his suit belying the tension in his posture. Each movement he made was measured, cautious, as if navigating a world that no longer bent to his will. She took a slow, deliberate breath, the kind that grounded her in the present and anchored the months of preparation, recovery, and reclamation she had endured. Every sleepless night, every quiet sacrifice, and every moment of steadfast resilience converged in this single moment of confrontation and revelation. The soft gurgle of Ethan Jr. provided a rhythm, a grounding beat against the undercurrent of uncertainty in the room. Olivia met Ethan Parker's gaze with unwavering poise, her lips curving in a faint, confident smile that carried the weight of experience and quiet triumph. Dr. Harper approached, holding the clipboard with the DNA confirmation, her voice low but precise. "Everything is in order. The results confirm the lineage." The words floated in the air, precise and irrevocable, carrying an invisible gravity that shifted the energy between the two adults. Ethan Parker's expression faltered, the practiced confidence in his eyes giving way to a subtle, unguarded surprise that hinted at realization, a flicker of comprehension that he had underestimated the strength Olivia had cultivated. Olivia's shoulders relaxed slightly, a gentle yet firm stance that radiated the quiet authority she had earned, her eyes reflecting the culmination of patience, foresight, and unspoken power. She leaned over, smoothing a stray curl on Ethan Jr.'s forehead, her movements calm and deliberate, a visual assertion of presence, nurturing, and control. The room seemed to pulse with the new balance of authority, the sunlight catching on the mobile above the crib and casting gentle shadows on the walls, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor now a harmonious backdrop rather than a reminder of tension. Olivia envisioned the days ahead, careful steps through social encounters, subtle reinforcements of boundaries, and a deliberate shaping of her future, each decision infused with the calm certainty of one who had endured and emerged stronger. Ethan Parker took a tentative step closer, his voice measured and cautious, yet it lacked the sharp edge it once carried. Olivia's gaze remained steady, her inner voice aligned with her outward composure, reinforcing the quiet dominance she now held over the narrative of her life. The interplay of light and shadow, the gentle hum of distant activity, and the soft warmth of her son's presence created an environment charged with anticipation, a delicate equilibrium where past grievances met present resolve. In that room, every small gesture, every measured breath, every glance held weight, carrying the promise of a future defined not by what was taken, but by what was nurtured, reclaimed, and built anew. Olivia's smile deepened, subtle yet potent, a silent herald of the empowerment, clarity, and direction that had transformed her existence, leaving the story suspended at the cusp of revelation, with a sense of unfolding that demanded attention and promised a profound emotional payoff. The evening light slanted through the hospital windows, casting long, warm streaks across the floor as Olivia Hayes sat quietly in the rocking chair, gently swaying Ethan Jr. in her arms. The soft cooing of her son filled the room with a serene rhythm, contrasting sharply with the tension that had hung there only hours before. Olivia's gaze shifted to the small table by the window where Dr. Harper had placed the DNA confirmation papers, a quiet reminder of the power that knowledge could hold. She traced the edge of the envelope with her fingers, feeling the weight of the months she had spent building a life that was no longer defined by fear or expectation. The distant hum of the city outside the hospital walls seeped through the slightly open window, carrying with it the sound of life moving forward, indifferent to past grievances, yet full of possibility. Olivia's eyes met Ethan Parker's across the room, his posture stiff, the lines of his suit perfectly pressed, yet his expression betrayed a flicker of uncertainty and unease. He remained silent, aware that the balance had shifted, that the quiet strength Olivia carried was now undeniable, shaping the space and controlling the narrative without a single raised voice. She adjusted Ethan Jr., smoothing the blanket over his small body, each movement deliberate, filled with both care and an assertion of control, a physical manifestation of the resilience that had grown through countless nights of solitude and quiet perseverance. Dr. Harper moved closer, her presence steady and measured, observing without interrupting, a witness to the transformation that had taken place not only in Olivia's life, but in the atmosphere around her. Olivia's thoughts wandered briefly to the months of rebuilding, the freelance projects, the careful attention to every detail of her home and routine, all small acts of reclaiming autonomy and reinforcing her own power in a world that had once attempted to diminish her. Ethan Jr. gurgled softly, drawing Olivia's attention back to the present, grounding her in the tangible reality of the life she had created, a life shaped by deliberate choices and quiet fortitude. Ethan Parker took a hesitant step forward, his eyes tracing the gentle rise and fall of his son's chest, the realization dawning that his former certainty had been replaced by a force he could not influence or control. Olivia's lips curved in a composed, knowing smile, not of triumph over him, but of affirmation of her own journey, a silent acknowledgement of the endurance and careful strategy that had brought her to this moment. The room seemed charged with subtle energy, the interplay of light and shadow emphasizing the quiet power Olivia embodied. Each sound, each breath, each movement contributing to the tension and the anticipation of what would come next. She leaned slightly over Ethan Jr., her hand brushing a lock of hair from his forehead, a tender gesture filled with intention and presence, reinforcing the bond that grounded her in strength and purpose. The city beyond continued its ceaseless rhythm, traffic moving along avenues, lights blinking in distant buildings, yet inside this hospital room, time was suspended, defined by the deliberate steps, measured breaths, and quiet authority Olivia wielded with grace and precision. Every detail, from the warm sunlight on the floor to the soft hum of distant machinery, served as a backdrop for a woman asserting control over her life and the future of her child, leaving an unspoken promise of continued resilience, measured action, and the unfolding of a story defined by empowerment, foresight, and deliberate choice. The late afternoon sun began to dip lower, casting long, warm shadows across the hospital floor as Olivia Hayes carefully adjusted Ethan Jr. in his crib, the soft rustle of the blanket punctuating the quiet. The sterile scent of the room mixed with the faint sweetness of baby lotion, a reminder of the life she had nurtured and protected through months of vigilance and perseverance. Dr. Harper stood near the doorway, clipboard in hand, observing with a quiet, measured attention, aware of the significance of the moment without needing to intrude. Olivia's eyes, calm and resolute, met Ethan Parker's across the room, and she sensed the tension in his posture, the subtle hesitation that now accompanied every step he took. The polished lines of his suit could not conceal the shift in the balance of power, the realization slowly dawning that the certainty he had once commanded no longer applied. Olivia leaned slightly over the crib, brushing a soft curl from her son's forehead, her touch deliberate, grounding, a physical expression of the quiet authority she had cultivated. Each gentle movement, each measured breath, reinforced the aura of control and steadiness that had grown within her, a counterpoint to the uncertainty that lingered around Ethan Parker. Outside, the distant hum of city traffic and faint murmurs from the corridor reminded her that life moved forward, indifferent to past mistakes yet full of opportunities that she now held firmly in her grasp. The sunlight highlighted the subtle curve of her features, the composure that had been forged through late nights, solo responsibilities, and the relentless pursuit of stability for herself and her child. Ethan Parker's gaze flickered repeatedly between Olivia and Ethan Jr., the recognition of the distance that had been created between them tangible in every step and every pause. A quiet acknowledgement that the years of underestimation and disregard had shifted irreversibly. Olivia's lips curved in a small, confident smile, the kind that carried no arrogance but spoke of endurance, careful planning, and measured resilience. Each gesture and glance radiating the strength that had been built in silence over months of careful decision-making. Dr. Harper's presence remained understated, a witness to the subtle recalibration of authority in the room. The way Olivia's steady confidence contrasted with Ethan Parker's tentative movements. Olivia traced a finger along the edge of the crib, noting the rhythm of her son's breathing, the small signs of life that had become her anchor, a symbol of the control, care, and protection she now commanded. The interplay of sunlight and shadows, the gentle cooing of Ethan Jr., and the measured steps of Ethan Parker combined to create an atmosphere thick with anticipation, the weight of unspoken realizations hanging in the warm air. Olivia's mind calculated the next moments with precision, every glance, gesture, and word weighed carefully, reinforcing the quiet authority she had claimed. The room seemed to vibrate with possibility. Each soft sound, each reflection of light, each deliberate movement of her hands and gaze marking the continuation of a life she had reclaimed, leaving the story poised on the edge of revelation, a delicate tension that hinted at the unfolding of future choices, the quiet but undeniable power of presence, and the assurance that the next chapter would be defined by her resilience, foresight, and unwavering commitment to herself and her son. The golden light of late afternoon spilled into the hospital room, painting long, warm stripes across the floor as Olivia Hayes held Ethan Jr. close, feeling the steady weight and warmth of him against her chest. The soft beeping of the monitors provided a steady rhythm, blending with the faint hum of the air conditioning and distant footsteps outside, creating a quiet symphony that filled the space. Dr. Harper stood near the doorway, clipboard in hand, observing Olivia with a mixture of professional detachment and subtle acknowledgement of the moment's gravity. Olivia's eyes, calm and resolute, scanned the room, noting every detail, every subtle shift in light, every sound that marked the passage of time and the significance of the choices she had made. Ethan Parker remained near the door, his posture rigid, suit perfectly tailored, yet the tension in his shoulders and the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes betrayed the cracks in the facade he had maintained for years. Olivia gently placed Ethan Jr. in his crib, smoothing the blanket and adjusting the mobile above him, each movement deliberate, infused with care and quiet authority. She took a slow, steadying breath, feeling the months of preparation, rebuilding, and reclamation coalesce into a moment of quiet, powerful control. The sunlight reflected off the polished floor, catching the edges of the crib and illuminating the soft curves of her son, grounding Olivia in the tangible reality of the life she had nurtured and protected. Ethan Parker's gaze shifted repeatedly between Olivia and Ethan Jr., his initial rigidity softening into hesitation as the realization that the balance had shifted fully registered. Olivia's lips curved in a small, confident smile, not of triumph over him, but of affirmation of her own resilience, strategy, and measured strength. Dr. Harper approached slightly, her presence calm, her eyes observing, registering the subtle power dynamic that had unfolded and the quiet shift of control that Olivia now embodied. Olivia's hands traced the edges of the crib, noting the rhythm of her son's breathing, the tiny movements and signs of life that had become her anchor, a tangible reflection of the endurance, care, and deliberate choices she had made. The city beyond the hospital walls carried on with its distant hum, traffic and voices interweaving. Yet within this room, time seemed to slow, each breath, glance, and motion weighted with significance. Olivia envisioned the days ahead, mapping carefully each interaction, each step she would take, guided by the calm certainty she had cultivated. Every movement, from the gentle rocking of Ethan Jr. to the way she met Ethan Parker's hesitant steps with composed poise, radiated quiet authority, resilience, and foresight. The interplay of sunlight, shadows, and subtle sounds created an atmosphere heavy with anticipation, the story poised delicately between what had been endured and what was yet to come. Olivia's gaze softened on her son, feeling the pulse of life and the power of presence, knowing that the next chapter was hers to shape, defined by deliberate choices, unwavering attention, and the quiet strength that had carried her through months of challenges, leaving the moment suspended with a sense of unfolding possibility and the promise of continued resilience. The hospital corridor outside was quiet now, the fading sunlight filtering through the tall windows and casting a warm, amber glow across the floor, painting long shadows that stretched toward the room where Olivia Hayes stood beside Ethan Jr.'s crib. She adjusted the small blanket over his tiny frame, her hands steady and deliberate, each motion a quiet testament to months of patience, vigilance, and the careful reclaiming of her life. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors accompanied the faint hum of the ventilation system, blending into a steady background that emphasized the stillness and gravity of the moment. Dr. Harper stepped closer, her clipboard in hand, eyes calm and observant, understanding the delicate balance that hung in the room. Olivia's gaze swept across every detail, the polished hospital floor, the soft curve of Ethan Jr.'s cheek, the sunlight catching on the mobile above the crib, grounding her in the tangible reality of her choices and the quiet authority she now wielded. Ethan Parker lingered near the door, his posture rigid, the tailored lines of his suit impeccable, yet revealing the tension he could not mask, the subtle unease betraying a man confronted with the undeniable strength and poise of a woman he had underestimated for years. Olivia's lips curved in a composed, knowing smile, one that carried neither arrogance nor bitterness, only the affirmation of her resilience and measured foresight. She leaned slightly over Ethan Jr., smoothing a stray curl on his forehead, her movements deliberate, confident, and full of care, radiating an aura of quiet command over the space and over the unfolding moment. The city beyond the hospital walls continued its ceaseless rhythm, distant traffic and voices carrying through the slightly open window, yet inside the room, time seemed to slow, each breath, glance, and gesture laden with meaning and anticipation. Dr. Harper's presence remained unobtrusive, her calm observation a silent acknowledgement of Olivia's authority and the shift in the energy that now defined the room. Olivia's mind traced the careful steps she had taken to build this life, from the quiet nights spent nurturing her son to the deliberate choices that had forged her confidence and independence. Ethan Parker took a tentative step forward, his eyes flickering between Olivia and Ethan Jr., the recognition of her autonomy and the subtle shift in control reflected in the tight line of his jaw and the hesitation in his stance. Olivia's gaze remained steady, her expression composed, the faintest curve of a smile suggesting both reassurance and quiet triumph, a visual affirmation of her hard-earned strength. The interplay of sunlight, shadows, and ambient sounds in the room highlighted the delicate tension, the anticipation of what was to come, and the undeniable presence of a woman fully in command of her life and the life of her child. Each small gesture, every measured breath, and the soft coos of Ethan Jr. underscored the careful equilibrium Olivia had established, a space charged with potential and expectation. The story poised on the edge of revelation, with the promise of continued growth, deliberate action, and the unfolding of a future defined by resilience, wisdom, and unwavering focus. The hospital room was bathed in the soft glow of early evening, sunlight slipping through the blinds and tracing golden patterns across the floor as Olivia Hayes adjusted the small blanket over Ethan Jr., his tiny hands curling around hers in instinctive trust. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors blended with the distant sounds of the corridor, footsteps, and muted conversations, forming a quiet soundtrack to a moment pregnant with anticipation. Olivia's eyes scanned the room, noting every detail, the crib mobile spinning lazily above her son, the sunlight reflecting off polished surfaces, the subtle shadows that lengthened across the floor, each element grounding her in the careful reality she had created. Dr. Harper remained close by, her presence calm, measured, a quiet acknowledgement of the deliberate control Olivia now embodied. Ethan Parker lingered near the doorway, posture rigid, hands lightly gripping the frame. His expression a mixture of hesitation and disbelief, the shift in dynamics undeniable, a tension that radiated through every inch of the space. Olivia's lips curved in a subtle, confident smile, her movements graceful and deliberate as she leaned over the crib to smooth Ethan Jr.'s blanket. A simple action filled with authority and care, a demonstration of the patience, strategy, and resilience she had cultivated over months of solitary perseverance. The soft hum of the hospital ventilation mingled with the faint coos and gurgles of her son, creating a rhythm that reinforced the stability and presence Olivia now commanded. Outside, the city continued its ceaseless motion, distant traffic and muffled voices a reminder that the world moved on. Yet within the room, time seemed suspended, each breath, glance, and gesture charged with significance. Olivia reflected on the months of rebuilding, long nights spent nurturing, deliberate steps to reclaim independence, careful planning to ensure that every choice reinforced her strength and the well-being of her child. She straightened slightly, lifting her gaze to Ethan Parker, noting the subtle shift in his posture, the way uncertainty now tempered his once assured confidence, a silent acknowledgement of the transformation in the room and in her presence. Dr. Harper adjusted her clipboard, glancing briefly at the monitors, then at Olivia, the quiet approval in her eyes confirming the equilibrium Olivia had established, a space where authority, care, and foresight converged. Olivia's hands traced the edges of the crib, her movements methodical, reinforcing the deliberate structure and the power of presence she had nurtured, each gesture a testament to the endurance and quiet mastery she now possessed. The interplay of sunlight, shadows, and subtle sounds created a charged atmosphere, a delicate tension that reflected the careful balance of past struggles and present strength. Olivia lifted Ethan Jr., holding him close, feeling the warmth and steady heartbeat that anchored her in the reality she had forged, a life defined not by what had been lost, but by the deliberate choices that had shaped resilience, foresight, and the promise of unfolding possibilities. Every glance, every motion, every measured breath underscored the quiet authority she wielded, the story suspended on the brink of revelation, charged with the anticipation of what was to come, and the certainty that she and her son were at the center of a future she now fully controlled. The room had shifted subtly in energy as Olivia Hayes stood near the window, Ethan Jr. cradled in her arms, sunlight painting warm streaks across the floor and highlighting the gentle curve of his cheek. The monitors hummed steadily, a metronome to the quiet intensity in the room, while the faint footsteps of staff echoed down the corridor, a reminder of the world beyond these walls. Olivia's gaze moved to Ethan Parker, who lingered hesitantly near the doorway, his posture a mixture of formality and unease, the tailored lines of his suit rigid, betraying the tension beneath. Each glance he gave was measured, cautious, an unspoken acknowledgement that the dynamic had changed irrevocably. Olivia's movements were fluid yet deliberate as she adjusted the blanket over Ethan Jr., smoothing a fold here, tucking a corner there, every gesture infused with calm authority and quiet confidence. Dr. Harper remained nearby, her presence understated but observant, a silent witness to the shift of control and the equilibrium that Olivia now commanded. The sunlight catching on the polished surfaces of the crib and the floor emphasized the stillness of the moment, drawing focus to Olivia's composed expression and the aura of measured strength that radiated from her. Ethan Jr. gurgled softly, bringing Olivia's attention back to the tangible, grounding her in the life she had nurtured and protected, a vivid reminder of the purpose behind her careful reclamation of power. Ethan Parker's tentative steps forward revealed his uncertainty, his eyes flicking between mother and child, realizing that the certainty he had once relied upon was no longer within his grasp. Olivia's lips curved into a subtle, knowing smile, the kind that carried neither malice nor triumph over another, but the affirmation of her own resilience, planning, and deliberate action. She leaned slightly, smoothing a strand of hair across her son's forehead, her touch gentle yet deliberate, a visual manifestation of control and presence that needed no words to assert authority. The distant hum of the city outside, the occasional faint chatter from the corridor, and the steady rhythm of the monitors all blended to create a soundscape that emphasized the measured pace and careful control Olivia maintained. Her thoughts traced the months of preparation, the reconstruction of her life, the cultivation of independence, and the creation of a nurturing environment for Ethan Jr., each element combining to fortify the deliberate and unyielding authority she now embodied. The interplay of light, shadows, and subtle sounds heightened the quiet anticipation, a delicate tension that underscored the moment's significance and the unfolding potential. Olivia's gaze returned to her son, each breath, each soft movement reinforcing the silent strength she had developed, the story poised on the edge of revelation and the promise of the choices that lay ahead. Every gesture, glance, and measured step radiated resilience, careful foresight, and an unspoken command over her life and the life she had protected, leaving the atmosphere charged with anticipation, subtle power, and the promise of unfolding consequences. The soft glow of early evening settled over the hospital room, bathing every surface in a warm, golden light as Olivia Hayes held Ethan Jr. close, feeling the subtle rise and fall of his tiny chest beneath her hand. The monitors provided a steady rhythm, their quiet beeps punctuating the room in harmony with the calm yet intense atmosphere. Olivia's eyes moved over every detail, the crib mobile spinning lazily, the sunlight reflecting off the polished floor, the shadows stretching across the walls, each element grounding her in the careful reality she had meticulously constructed. Dr. Harper remained nearby, calm and observant, her presence an understated acknowledgement of the quiet authority Olivia now wielded. Ethan Parker lingered at the doorway, the tailored lines of his suit rigid, his stance formal yet hesitant, the unease in his posture betraying the subtle shift in control he now faced. Olivia's lips curved in a gentle, knowing smile, one that radiated patience, resilience, and quiet power, reflecting the months of careful planning, the nights spent nurturing her son alone, and the deliberate steps she had taken to reclaim her life. She leaned slightly over Ethan Jr., brushing a soft curl from his forehead, each motion deliberate and infused with care, demonstrating the quiet command she held over the space and the unfolding moment. The faint hum of the ventilation system mingled with the distant sounds of the corridor, creating a soundscape that emphasized the deliberate calm Olivia maintained. Ethan Parker's gaze shifted repeatedly between mother and child, subtle flickers of uncertainty and recognition passing over his features, a silent acknowledgement that the balance of authority had changed irreversibly. Olivia's thoughts traced the careful reconstruction of her life, each small step and decision meticulously calculated, forming a fortress of independence, resilience, and measured strength. She straightened, her posture confident yet calm, radiating a composed power that required no words, a presence that dominated the room silently yet unmistakably. The sunlight and shadows continued to play across the floor, highlighting the delicate interplay of light and tension in the room, and Olivia allowed herself a small, measured smile as she observed Ethan Parker's tentative movements, the subtle shift in his demeanor a reflection of her careful stewardship of the present moment. Dr. Harper adjusted her clipboard slightly, her calm presence reinforcing the quiet gravity of the space, witnessing the transformation of energy from hesitation and tension to acknowledgement and balance. Olivia held Ethan Jr. against her shoulder, feeling the gentle warmth and rhythm of his breathing, grounding her in the tangible results of her perseverance, foresight, and deliberate choices. Each soft coo, every measured motion, and the interplay of light and shadow emphasized the controlled, deliberate power she wielded, leaving the story poised on the cusp of revelation and future unfolding, charged with anticipation, quiet triumph, and the unspoken promise of continued agency and resilience in the life she had meticulously shaped for herself and her son. The late afternoon sunlight shifted gently across the hospital room, casting a warm, golden hue over Olivia Hayes as she held Ethan Jr. against her chest, feeling the subtle rise and fall of his tiny frame. The monitors continued their steady beeping, a soft, rhythmic pulse that underscored the quiet intensity in the room. Olivia's gaze swept across every detail, the spinning mobile above the crib, the sunlight glinting off the polished floor, the the shadows stretching lazily across the walls, each element reinforcing the reality she had carefully constructed for herself and her son. Dr. Harper remained close, her presence calm and unobtrusive, observing with measured attention the careful equilibrium Olivia now commanded. Ethan Parker lingered near the doorway, posture rigid, suit impeccably tailored, yet each subtle shift in his stance betrayed the tension and uncertainty that now accompanied his presence. Olivia's lips curved in a small, confident smile, one that carried neither triumph nor malice, only the quiet acknowledgement of the resilience, foresight, and authority she had cultivated over months of deliberate, patient rebuilding. She adjusted the blanket around Ethan Jr., each movement precise, deliberate, infused with care and control, a physical embodiment of the inner strength that had carried her through countless late nights, careful planning, and solitary perseverance. The distant hum of the city outside the hospital, faint traffic, and muffled conversations beyond the walls contrasted with the stillness inside, highlighting the deliberate control Olivia exerted over this space and moment. Ethan Parker's gaze flickered repeatedly between mother and child, subtle realization and hesitation passing over his features, an unspoken acknowledgement of the shift in dynamics and the quiet power Olivia now held. Olivia's thoughts traced the months of meticulous reconstruction, the reclaiming of her independence, the careful cultivation of a life built on her own terms, and the unwavering commitment to nurture and protect her son. Each careful breath, every measured gesture, and the soft coos of Ethan Jr. underscored the deliberate presence and authority she now radiated. The interplay of light and shadow, the gentle movement of air through the room, and the subtle sounds of life beyond the walls combined to create a charged yet calm atmosphere, one that reflected the balance of patience, endurance, and quiet triumph Olivia embodied. She leaned slightly, brushing a stray curl from Ethan Jr.'s forehead, her movements fluid and deliberate, reinforcing the deliberate cadence of her presence. The story within the room was one of subtle but undeniable power, each small motion, glance, and breath affirming the careful mastery she held over her life, her son, and the unfolding moments that lay ahead, leaving the narrative poised at the edge of a profound revelation, the delicate tension of anticipation, and the promise of a future defined by resilience, foresight, and unwavering confidence. The late afternoon sunlight softened further, spilling long golden beams across the hospital room, where Olivia Hayes stood with Ethan Jr. cradled gently in her arms, the subtle warmth of his tiny body grounding her in the moment. The monitors continued their steady beeping, a quiet rhythm that underscored the still intensity of the space. Olivia's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail, the spinning mobile above the crib, the way the light caught on the polished floor, the delicate shadows stretching along the walls, and the gentle hum of the air conditioning, each element blending into a scene of controlled calm and anticipation. Dr. Harper remained nearby, her posture composed and observant, silently acknowledging the quiet authority Olivia now commanded. Ethan Parker lingered near the doorway, his stance stiff, the precise lines of his tailored suit doing little to mask the subtle tension in his shoulders, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes betraying the realization that the balance had shifted. Olivia adjusted Ethan Jr., smoothing the soft blanket over his tiny frame with deliberate care, each movement confident and purposeful, a quiet affirmation of her resilience and careful planning. She straightened, lifting her gaze to the doorway where Ethan Parker remained, and allowed a faint, knowing smile to touch her lips, one that radiated composed strength, measured triumph, and quiet command over the room without a single word spoken. The soft coos of Ethan Jr. mixed with the distant, muted sounds of the corridor beyond, creating a rhythm that emphasized the deliberate, measured atmosphere Olivia maintained. Her thoughts traced the months of meticulous reconstruction, the careful steps she had taken to reclaim her life, the nights spent nurturing and protecting her son, each action a thread in the web of strength, foresight, and quiet empowerment she now embodied. Ethan Parker's eyes shifted between Olivia and the crib, the subtle hesitation in his posture a silent acknowledgement that the certainty he had once relied upon had been replaced by a force he could not influence or control. Olivia's gaze returned to her son, feeling the warmth and steady heartbeat against her chest, grounding her in the tangible reality of what she had achieved and protected. Dr. Harper adjusted her clipboard slightly, noting the serene and authoritative energy in the room, the interplay of light, shadow, and sound accentuating the subtle but undeniable power Olivia carried. Each gentle movement, every measured breath, and the soft hum of activity outside contrasted with the calm command within the room, highlighting the deliberate, controlled strength Olivia now possessed. The sunlight painted patterns on the walls and floor, emphasizing the quiet dignity and mastery with which Olivia navigated the space, her presence radiating resilience, awareness, and the careful authority she had cultivated. The story of the room, of the mother and child, of the shifting energy with Ethan Parker observing silently, created a moment suspended in time, a delicate balance of anticipation, empowerment, and the promise of a future defined by deliberate action, careful choice, and unwavering confidence. Every small gesture, every glance, every breath was laden with meaning, leaving the atmosphere charged with potential, the narrative poised on the edge of revelation, the quiet triumph of a woman fully in command of her life and the life she had so carefully protected, ready for what would unfold next.